All right, here we go. We have the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. Welcome to VladTV.
Thank you.
Well, look, a lot of us got to know you from the movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and it was a hell of a movie. And from what I understand, it was actually fairly accurate in terms of your life story. So since this is your first time here, I want to start in the very beginning.
Sure.
So you were born in the Bronx.
Born in a hospital in the Bronx, but was taken 5 days later to Queens, or 3 days later, where I grew up in Queens, which was the borough right next to the Bronx, maybe like 10 minutes away.
Okay. And you had both parents in the house?
Correct.
And they were both accountants?
Correct.
So were they stock investors themselves, or were they strictly accountants?
My parents were the most conservative people that you could ever meet. So they were accountants. My father they were both CPAs, in fact, not just accountants. And they were both highly educated, brilliant, and hardworking. But we had no money. And that was something that I think came into my belief system about what it takes to become wealthy, is that, you could be brilliant, hardworking, educated, and broke. There's something else involved besides that. And that's really, I think, what came into making me who I am today in my belief systems.
Okay. So you graduate high school and you're on your way to college, but you need to raise money for college. So you actually started an Italian ice company?
Correct. So I was the kid that always had the lemonade stand. I was delivering newspapers. I did magic shows as a kid. I mean, you name it, I did. Shovel driveways after snowstorms. But I hit it big when I was about 16, 17, made large amounts of money going down to the local beach, Jones Beach, and selling ices, blanket to blanket. I made about $30,000, which in today's dollars is probably $100,000 the first summer I did that. And then about $150,000 in today's dollars the second summer. And I used that money to put myself through school.
Got it. Okay, so you went to American University and you got a degree in biology, of all things?
Yeah, well, again, part of my belief systems were based on the things my parents told me. My mother especially, from the time I was 2 years old, or probably a year old, sitting in the high chair, my mother would spoon feed me applesauce. She was like, the only noble way to become wealthy is to be a doctor or a dentist. So, I went to, college, got a degree in biology and chemistry. And if you would have asked me what I wanted to do when I graduated, I'd say I want to be rich for a living. But since that was, reverberating in my mind, doctor, wealthy, I ended up applying to medical school and dental school. I got in both, but I went to dental school because I figured it was shorter, 4 years versus 8. And that's what happened.
Right. And I guess when you got to dental school, the professor said the golden age of dentistry is over. So if you want to make a lot of money, you're in the wrong place.
And I walked out the same day. So that was like, I got a gut that boom, whoa, wait a second, like a wake up call. This is a waste of time. And I dropped out, straight away. And then went back a few months later, moved back in with my parents, which was no picnic, I can assure you, into the same 2-bedroom apartment I'd grown up with my brother. And I started as a salesman. I answered a blind ad in the newspaper and began selling door to door meat and fish. Quickly became the top salesman, like right at the first day as the top salesman of the company. I had a natural gift for sales, which I realized at that moment, crystallized. Opened my own meat business about a month later and built that up to about 26, 27 trucks when I was still 21, just turning 22. And then made every mistake a young entrepreneur can make. Overexpanded, undercapitalized, growing on credit, not controlling my inventory, not filtering out the people I was hiring to drive my trucks. I mean, it was the worst run business in the history of businesses. And it was a shitty business to start. And it went bankrupt when I was 23. And that's what brought me down to Wall Street.
Okay, so here you are, your business goes bankrupt. You're broke, I'm assuming.
Broker than broke, yeah.
Broker than broke. And you decide to go to Wall Street and become a trainee stockbroker.
Yes.
Okay. And right around that time, Black Monday came.
So I actually went down there before Black Monday, and I had to train for about 7, 8 months. And when I finally passed my exam and I got my first day on the phone as a broker, that was Black Monday. And I watched in shock and awe as the market went down 508 points my first day. And just like that, a firm that had been in business for 100 years, LF Rothschild, shut its doors, and I was out of a job.
Wow. So that whole firm went down, kind of like Lehman Brothers.
Exactly.
Okay, so you just saw a bloodbath on the stock market, essentially. And you lost your job. And then that's when you started looking at other stock-related kind of companies.
Well, not really. So what happened was, when so it's hard to imagine the mindset back on that day. Wall Street was like closed down for a time, and everyone thought it was going to be the beginning of the Great Depression, the next Great Depression, right? So no one on Wall Street was hiring. So I picked up the newspaper that next day looking for any job as a salesperson. I knew I could sell anything. And my wife and I were looking, and she says, "Hey, what's this ad?" It was an ad looking for stockbrokers in Long Island. I was like, wow, that's weird. Stockbrokers not on Wall Street. And it was part-time, full-time, which is even weirder. And when I called up the company, some gruff-sounding voice was like, "Investor Center." I'm like, "Investor Center? What the heck?" It was just weird. But I showed up the next day for a job and walked in, couldn't believe what I saw. There was, no computers. It was like going back into the caveman days of Wall Street. Kids running around in jeans and sneakers, yelling into their phones, cursing at their customers. They were selling penny stocks. And I didn't even know what a penny stock was, but I was desperate and I took the job.
Okay, and this was Stratton Securities?
No, this was a company called the Investor Center. And that's where I started in the penny stock world. And literally the first call, I broke the record for the largest trade. I used my sales skills. And this is before I invented the system that ultimately became famous around the world for teaching salespeople. This is just my own, I was using that system without knowing it, just intuitively saying certain things. And the first month I broke all the records, and about, 3 months, I was swimming in money, making over $100,000 a month. And I was approached to open up my own firm. And that's really what brought me into starting Stratton Securities.
Got it. Which became Stratton Oakmont?
Correct. So in the beginning, I was a franchise of an existing firm named Stratton. And this time, I learned from my mistakes of my last business. And every mistake I'd made in my first business, I did the opposite in this business. This, right from the start, was incredibly well run as a small upstart. I just, when you fail, that's where the lessons are. And I still believe that. I think most successful people will tell you that you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. So that really, my first business was like going to Harvard Business School and then some. And I felt really well prepared my second go around to do everything according to best practices for a upstart business. And I followed that, and then everything started going well. And then I came up with an idea about 2 or 3 months later, which really was the evolution of Stratton Oakmont, which was changing from calling average moms and pops to calling the richest 1%, not selling penny stocks, but selling $5 to $10 stocks. So a better stock, richer people, the richest people in the country. And then to close that gap, I created a system of training salesmen called the Straight Line. And that's what allowed all these young kids to close rich people. Before that, they weren't able to. So this sales system, along with this niche I uncovered, was like this 1-2 punch that created Stratton.
Okay, so let's talk about the penny stocks for a second. So, for a lot of people who don't understand, you have Fortune 500 companies, Google, Amazon, Walmart, and so forth. These are very big, well-established companies. They have quarterly reports that are all, vetted by professionals, and, they make billions of dollars, and they're relatively safe overall. But then there's penny stocks, which are much, much smaller companies with sometimes questionable products and sometimes questionable financials. And it's much, much riskier to invest in these companies, but they're also way, way cheaper. Out of all these penny stocks, what percentage of these companies are just completely illegitimate and just scams? Like sometimes you see these like delis that are valued at like $1 billion.
I know the guy, by the way, he's a friend of mine. That just
okay, you know what I'm talking about.
I know the guy who owns this deli, and I don't know anything about the deli, but somehow he owns this deli that is valued at $1 billion.
Right. It's like one deli. Like, it's not even like a string of delis. It's one deli somewhere and it's valued at $1 billion because the penny stock went through the roof. So tell me, like, in terms of these penny stocks, like what percentage, honestly, are legitimate companies, are legitimate investments versus just complete? Sure.
So 100% of the companies I took public were legitimate. There was not one illegitimate company I ever took public. That's
okay,
why
not took public, but had people invest in.
Took anything, investing in privately or publicly. In other words, whether they were public or private, every single one was a legitimate company. Now, when you find, it's very rare that you find an illegitimate company, unless it's controlled by the mob or just like a bunch of kids doing some shit behind the scenes. Like, that's not the way things work. And that was the one part of the movie that was misleading. You would never do that. Like, you would never, there's no reason to. I mean, there's enough legitimate companies out there that you can take public. Everyone wants to raise money and be public, right? So it's not what happens. It's a speculative company. It might have, management that's not up to task, but you would never, I mean, unless you got fooled, no one in their right mind would ever float a company that didn't exist. It's ridiculous because there's enough companies that exist. What happens is, though, is when they're thinly traded like that, usually there's one entity, whether it's a brokerage firm, a newsletter service nowadays, or an internet chat room, where they get behind the stock and they pump that stock up to an artificially inflated value. So it's not that the company's not legitimate. It's there, but it's not worth nearly what it's being valued at in the market. Hence the deli. There's a deli. I'm sure, listen, I don't know the deli. I've never been there, but I'm sure there's a deli and it's like operating and it's probably worth maybe $500,000, but you get it? So to say it's an illegitimate company, it's not an accurate statement. It's just it's a manipulated stock. In the movie, that was just too complex to explain. So when I get why they did that, I say, the company's, it was legit. That's not true.
Okay, right. So an example of this would be like GameStop. GameStop got pumped up through memes, and even though it's a relatively bad investment, it's a string of, retail stores that are doing badly overall because a meme got behind it and all these people got behind it. It got pumped up to like 10 times, 100 times what it was before. People bailed out of it and then it dropped drastically. Right? That's
not a good example. It's a different situation there. That's a really odd situation. That's a combination of a short squeeze. GameStop's a legitimate, massive company in the billions of dollars in sales. It happens to be the declining company that probably is, if you look at the fundamentals, it's probably worth a few dollars a share. There was a time when GameStop was trading at $1 or $2, and someone wrote a research paper saying it was worth $8 to $12, which would be a huge profit. But there was other people that were short the stock. I know them, they're friends of mine. They were short heavily. And what happened is as the stock started to catch some momentum up, it was a short squeeze. And that created this sort of us against them mentality combined with a pandemic where everyone was home on their phones trading on Robinhood. And you got this wild, situation that was really very seldom repeated. It happened with AMC and a couple of others, but it became sort of a stock that traded not because it was on fundamentals, it was a technical trade based on short squeezes and people saying, let's fuck over the man, let's take down the institutions and so on and so forth. That's not an accurate example, but that, there are many examples of that are where it's simply overvalued because someone's pumping it up and it's one person and they are going to do a pump and dump.
Exactly. Okay. So your company starts to take off. And as it's taking off and more people get hired and the money starts rolling in, you start to develop a serious drug problem.
Right.
And you said at one point you were on 22 different drugs?
Yeah.
Like
well, what happens?
All in the same time, like day, week, or are you just taking drug after drug?
What happens, maybe not all at the same time, but like when I got sober, in 1997, April 17th, 1997, right? And when I got sober, I had this bag with me that they grabbed my bag of drugs. And there was literally 22 different types of drugs in there that I was taking at any given moment. Maybe not all in one day, but all within a few days or a week. So it was just like a potpourri of dangerous pharmaceuticals that I was using to balance out. So what happens is you start off with one drug and you're like, oh shit, that's making me tired. Let me go back up again. Oops, now I have anxiety. Let me take an anxiolytic. Oh, I'm tired again. And you get to this cycle where it's just one drug on top of the next. And before you know it, you're doing insane things and it just seems perfectly normal.
Right. And with the drugs came the partying and everything over the top that you got to see in Wolf of Wall Street. But from what I understand, the real story is actually crazier than the movie.
Yeah. So, I guess, listen, there were some scenes that just weren't fit for public consumption. And when I was writing the book, I had a female editor and I was writing these crazy scenes. And she was like, oh my God, this is great. People are going to love this stuff. And I was like, wow, okay, let me just keep going. And, I got to this one scene and she kept saying, oh my God, it's great. You're so bad. It's so great. What a redemption story. And then I got to my bachelor party and I wrote this out in all this gory detail. And she sends me back a note. I just don't think other human beings will understand this. So we edited that part out. So there's some stuff that got edited out. But generally speaking, what you saw in the movie was a glimpse into the insanity that happens when you have basically an unlimited amount of money, many, many, many young people in one self-contained universe. So mob theory starts to take hold, the mob. And when the mob is doing something, they'll act very differently than any one individual. So mob mentality takes hold and it becomes almost a can you top this situation where as an action junkie, you're looking for higher and higher cliffs to jump off of and shallower and shallower pools to land in. That was basically what was going on.
Right. Well, you talked about the bachelor party, and I guess there was like 200 prostitutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhere between 130 and 175 probably. We brought some with us. We got some more in Vegas, and it just was, it was completely insane, just over the top insane.
Right. I guess it was like Caligula, like a room, in a casino that just everyone was just having sex in, like dozens and dozens of people.
It was insane. It was complete Caligula on steroids. It was Sodom and Gomorrah on the 17th or 18th floor of the Mirage, which was the place to be back then.
Right. And I guess that same night after you woke up, there was a safe where you had $1.2 million.
Right. So one of my friends back then, a business associate, guy named Elliot Levine, he's just a total wild man. And he was a huge gambler. And he would play blackjack, like just 7 hands, 10,000 a hand, double downs, and winning or losing a few $1 million in one night. And before that, before we went up to the bachelor party, we were gambling together, playing blackjack. He was up somewhere around $1 million too. I think I was up like 700,000 or 800,000, maybe more. I forgot already. And we left there, and I took my money with me, probably over $1 million, and put it in my safe. We were sharing a room, and big, one of those big villas there, right? And we put the money in the safe, and he left his money on the table. And anyway, I left the bachelor party because it was just so insane, and went to sleep. And when I woke up the next day, he's shaking me awake. Come on, let's go. We got to get out of here. This place is too depraved. And I went to the safe, and the money was gone. He took my money and lost his money, my money, and and he went on to lose about 40 million over the next few months, and just blew out financially. Huge gambler.
Right. I mean, the kind of money you were making during that time, I guess in 1 year you made 49 million.
In cash. I mean, we made a lot more than that on paper. I mean, I stakes in companies valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, the cash portion was probably 49 and, more or less. And then, we had hundreds of millions in paper.
Right. I guess you were annoyed that you only made 49 because if you made 52, you'd be making $1 million a week.
There you go. Right. Good line from the movie.
Right. You had a private jet, a huge estate, 2 vacation homes, 6 cars, including a white Ferrari, 3 horses. What am I missing right now?
The 170 foot yacht, maybe?
The 170-foot yacht, Nadine.
The Nadine.
The Nadine.
Which I sunk.
And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, a lot of the stuff, the chaos that you see in The Office, I guess a lot of it was actually true. So you actually paid a woman $10,000 to shave her head so she could buy breast implants?
Correct. So it didn't start that way. It started with us paying a guy who was struggling $10,000 to shave his head. He had a great head of hair. His name was Chris Finkel. And, he's always playing with his hair in the boardroom. So we just said, hey, let's shave your head. We'll give you 10 grand. And he was like, yeah, I'll do that. Right. So we got the whole thing set up with a barbershop pole. We made a big deal over it with the video cameras. Right. And then the next head shaving was like 5,000. And then it became not that much of a big deal to shave a guy's head. So we said, well, what can we do next? Let's shave a girl's head. It just seemed logical, the next evolution of this. So we got this girl who wanted breast implants. We shaved her head for 10 grand and she went and bought some breasts. So it was a win-win for everybody.
Okay. The dwarf tossing. Did that really happen?
So I wasn't there for the dwarf tossing. I've heard, we talked about it. So, in my book, I wrote the whole thing about dwarf tossing, and it takes place in my office. And we're going through this whole conversation about we should hire midgets. And then in the movie, they actually had midgets being tossed. So I think that happened after I was gone from the firm. Thank God. I was strategically absent that day if it happened. I neither will admit or deny guilt.
Okay. And at one point, you had over 1,000 stockbrokers?
More than that. We had thousands of people. So the way it was set up, we had stockbrokers, account openers, cold callers, all in one giant room with sales assistants. And it was probably over like 1,800 people probably at one time.
Wow. And you guys are moving billions of dollars worth of stocks at this point.
Yes, billions of dollars of stocks.
And you guys start getting involved in IPOs, and Steve Madden was one of the big ones?
Yeah, so the movie's is totally inaccurate in that regard. So in the movie, they have Steve Madden as this big company that we get to take public, and it wasn't true. It was a nothing. It was a startup company that I invested in, and I put all the money up to start it. I owned the vast majority. I owned 85% of the company. Steve was a minority shareholder. He was just getting started. He had one shoe. He was selling out of the trunk of his car. And I gave him that money, and then I sold off part of my holdings, got my original investment back very quickly. And then the company started to grow and grow, and eventually it became a huge company. We took it public. It was doing about probably 15 million when we took it public. And then today it's a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, I actually looked it up. It's still public. It's worth $3.2 billion market cap.
Yeah. So my stake would be worth probably around $2 billion or $1.5 billion.
Right, because you made like $22 million in 3 hours when they went public?
Well, that was just on the trading of the stock. Trading, it was a hot new issue, Steve Madden. So when it went public, we made about 25 million bucks, somewhere in that range. And but I'm talking about the equity. I actually owned the company itself. So I was on both sides. I was the investment banker that took it public, and I owned the company as well.
Got it. Okay. And during most of the time that you guys were in business, you were being investigated.
Correct.
Okay. What triggered the first investigation?
Mostly bad luck. I mean, we weren't doing anything extraordinarily bad. The firm was very legitimate in the beginning. And we were selling $5 stocks to the richest 1%. And I think what happened was someone that I was doing business with got in trouble, and they said some things about me, which triggered an investigation with the SEC, which went on for many years. And we settled that after like 3 or 4 years. And I paid a few $1 million, and I walked away from that. And then after that, I made a very big mistake, which was smuggling money to Switzerland. And that's ultimately what I got in trouble for, was the money smuggled to Switzerland. That was the thing that brought me down.
Okay, so the Switzerland thing. So you found a banker in Switzerland that allowed you to start a bank account completely under the radar. And the whole thing of like having your friends and relatives smuggle cash to Europe, was that a real thing?
100%, yeah. Exactly like that. My mother-in-law did it. My friends did it. If it was the Swiss girl did it. Yeah, we taped money to her body, the whole thing.
Okay, how much money can you tape to your body and actually make it off a plane?
I don't remember exactly. We had all taped up from head to toe. But the funnier thing is my mother-in-law carried like $2 million in her fucking suitcase. It just walked right through customs with $2 million, Yeah,
that was before 9/11 when they were going through everything.
Different time back then.
Okay, so the Swiss bank account, how much money did you have in that account at its height?
Oh, I don't know. We had so much money spread. It was spread over like 30 different accounts, tens of millions of dollars, a lot of money, and a lot of stock investments we were doing. So it was spread out over many different accounts.
Okay, and with this money, you bought a yacht, the Navy.
Not with that money. No, I bought a yacht with my own money here.
With other money, okay.
US.
With whatever money, you bought this huge yacht, 170-foot yacht. I guess Coco Chanel was the original owner?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess you decided to take it out during bad weather, and you end up sinking it.
I'll tell you something funny. You could actually there's a movie called Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes. And I was watching it on TV the other night. My yacht is in the movie. Yeah, actually, it's like the 54-minute mark. You see this great thing of my helicopter landing on the back of my boat. It's a great sweeping view of my boat. Very cool.
Now, were you taking the yacht out to go and get your money and not avoid customs, or no?
No.
Okay.
Purely
You're just going
pleasure.
out to party.
Just to party, have fun.
Okay. And while you're partying and you're getting high, you end up crashing your helicopter?
Not on the boat. I crashed it in my backyard. Like I didn't destroy it. I just had some hard landings.
Okay. You end up crashing up your car.
That
The
I
whole
did.
scene where you were high with
That's
the
100%
Ferrari.
accurate.
Okay, so you got so high that you completely totaled your car.
Well, I got that. Well, yeah, but I mean, like, the story's a bit more interesting than that. I mean, I took some Quaaludes that were old, very powerful, and I thought they were duds because they took so long to hit me. And then I took the car out for a very short ride to make a phone call because I thought my phones were bugged. And when I was out, all the hits, they hit me at once, and I drove home like 1 mile an hour. And I thought I made it home without a scratch. I'm like, thank you, God, right? And then when I got home, then next thing I know, the police are in my house arresting me, and I look at my car's just totaled out. Like, to this day, I could pass a lie detector test. I don't remember having an accident, but I did, apparently. I hit like 8 other cars, so.
Right. And then there was the incident when you and your wife get into it and you end up, I guess, grabbing your 3-year-old daughter and basically taking your car and driving it through the garage door.
That was April 16th, the day before I got sober. That was the moment that really was like that final when I knew I had to, that was it. It was the last day I used drugs, and, I literally was on a 3-month bender, and I was out of my mind, and I thought aliens were coming through the window. I was really out of it. And, you're at that point, you're in such denial. I was like, I don't have a problem, and then I took that car and drove through the garage door, and thank my daughter didn't, get hurt or anything like that. But that was the moment that I, got sober.
Right. And that same year, the NASD actually shut down Stratton Oakmont.
Yeah, I had been out of Stratton for years already. So I had sold Stratton in 94 and started in 88, sold it in 94. And I wasn't involved in it when it got shut down.
Okay. Because there's a part in the movie where basically you could have walked away from the company, not gone to prison, kept a bunch of money, but in the movie, Leonardo was like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay. And then that's what ultimately left,
That's not true. So it's not accurate. So that speech, I gave that speech probably 5 or 6 times. We're not fucking, it's going to take a wrecking ball and, no one's going to shut us down. But I did that over the years, like when we were under investigation, if a bad article would come out and there was a threat, I give a speech like that, right? But when I actually settled with the SEC, I did settle and I did walk away. And I went and ran Steve Madden's shoes. So I went to Steve Madden for the next year or so and helped Steve grow the company.
Okay. But at one point, the feds came in and, there was charges pending. Now, there's a whole part in the movie where you're wearing a wire.
Correct.
Did that actually happen?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what happened. It's really interesting. So when I got indicted, right, it was under indictment, and they were threatening to indict my wife. So I had no choice but to cooperate, and everyone in the case cooperated, right? And my lawyer's like, listen, you're not going to have to testify against anyone. Everyone cooperates in these cases because the way it works in the U.S. is that the penalties are so outlandishly bad. If you don't cooperate, you're going to jail for 30 years. And if you do, you can get literally 2 or 3 years. So everyone in Wall Street pretty much will cooperate. It's very common. 95% of the people cooperate. So I cooperated. And I was giving them information, and then they asked me to wear a wire, and it was against a very, and I wore a wire for them once or twice, but I was being very coy. I didn't do it in a way that would get anyone in trouble, right? Then they asked me to wear a wire against a close friend of mine. The other people I didn't even know, right? And that was where I drew the line. I said, I can't rat my friend out. And I slipped my friend a note saying, I'm wired, don't incriminate yourself. And at that moment, I felt really good about that. I'm like, I'm a really stand-up guy, and it's the right thing to do, and to be strong and not to rat your friend out. Until 3 months later, they came knocking on my door with the note. He got in trouble and fucking turned me in, the guy, and showed them the note. And it was at that point, I was like, fuck it. I'm like, I lost all faith in humanity. Then I cooperated, and I actually and I was more aggressive with it. Because after that, I was like, literally, this was like the biggest mistake of my life, because I was facing at that point, when I was caught with that note, 30 years in jail. And I was very lucky that the FBI agent, who I have tremendous respect for, did not press to have me thrown in jail for 30 years. And that could have destroyed my life. And it was that point I was like, this is it. There are no friends. Everyone's out to fuck you. And then I did wear a wire more aggressively.
Right. Well, the friend that you talk about wearing a wire for, was that Danny Porish?
No. So poor Danny got the Danny got the whole brunt of it. He had nothing to do with this. It was a completely different person. But what happened in the movie is a lot of characters got collapsed into Danny. So anything bad Danny did. So Danny it did not do a lot of the stuff. Other people had done it, but Danny was like that. And they did it a lot in movies. They just try to combine characters and stuff for the sake of the narrative.
Right. And Danny was your partner when you started the firm, and he was played by Jonah Hill in the movie.
He wasn't my partner when I started the firm myself. I had some one junior partner. Then Danny became a partner about a year later.
Okay, got it. And I guess in real life, Danny really did marry his first cousin.
This is true. And they hated each other immensely. It was classic.
Okay. So ultimately, you get indicted for securities fraud and money laundering in 99. And you were given a 4-year sentence initially?
Correct.
Okay. And you were basically, charged with scamming people out of $200 million?
No. So so this is the actual money loss was far, far, far lower. It was probably more around $40 to $50 million. That's the real number. Danny was accused for $200 million. Same case. They said when it got to me, it was 100. It went down to $100 million. The truth was they didn't know at the time, so they just picked some number of all the money that was sent in. It started at 200, then was reduced to 100. It's very similar. When anyone gets caught, they always say it was $5 billion, and it ends up being $1 billion. So yes, people lost money, but the number was closer to probably around 40 to 50 million.
Okay, so you get a 4-year sentence. When you hear, how old are you at the time when you got the 4 years?
2004, so it's
37?
42 years old.
42 years old. Okay. Well, you went in what year? 2004?
Yeah.
Okay, so it took a while for them to kind of put everything together.
It goes so slowly. It drags on for years and years and years. That's the worst part. Once you go to jail, it's easy. You get it over. But that was the top part where it's just painful, where you can't you're dying in slow motion. That's the worst part of all.
Right. When you heard the 4 years, at the age that you were at, the lifestyle you had been living and so forth, how did you feel?
I thought it would be less because Danny had got 4 years, and Danny had gotten in trouble again when he was cooperating. So he was cooperating as well, and he got in trouble, and they broke his agreement. But the judge, rightfully so, didn't ruin his life and gave him 4 years. And I was sentenced about a year and a half or 2 years later. And the judge gave me 4 years because he said I was the mastermind. I was the guy that came up with the whole thing. And Danny was more like my pawn in my game of chess. And it's probably in some regards he's right. In some regards he was wrong. But the judge, I think gave me a sentence he thought was long enough to teach me a lesson and to make a point, but not long enough to destroy my life and allow me to rebuild. So 4 years in the federal system means 2 years because you get time off for good behavior and other things. So I ended up serving 22 months and also went through a drug program, which God knows in my case was needed, right? So I did 22 months in jail and I came out still a young guy. So it was like, I think it was the appropriate sentence, and then having to pay back money, which I have,
Right. Well, you were ordered to pay back $110.4 million in restitution.
Right. But that was a number that wasn't based on what people lost. It was just a made up number. So, because Danny's was 210 million. So it was the same case. How could one be twice as high? It was just it was just, what happened was when we disgorged a lot of money in the beginning, probably 40 million, and to Danny and I, and there's other people in the case as well. And at the end, they couldn't find investors. They literally had $500,000 left that they gave back to the government. They couldn't find any more investors that were claiming money. So I started paying back money that wasn't going to investors. Like all the money I paid back since is not going to anybody because there was no investors left. So it's unfortunate that I paid back, but because no one was claiming the money.
Okay, so you start prison, and is this one of these like country club kind of prisons or like a real penitentiary?
Country club.
Okay. So you start this country club prison. I guess Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong is your cellmate.
That's right.
And
yes,
he actually encouraged you,
which was awesome.
Yep, I bet. Did you guys actually smoke weed in prison?
No.
No? Oh man.
Nah, I'm not a pot smoker. I don't think he did either.
Okay, right, because he was actually in jail for pot.
No.
Well, sort of. Well, it was for selling paraphernalia, where his son was selling it, and they just wanted to bust him.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there for the most idiotic thing. He should not have been in jail. It was nonsense.
No, yeah, I know the story. There's a whole documentary about
Nonsense.
it. It was ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
I deserve to go to jail. He didn't deserve to go to jail.
Okay. And while you guys are locked up, he's the one that's telling you should write a book.
Correct. Yes, he was writing a book, and I was telling him some stories. The first few nights when I got into the cell, he was there before me, and third night he's like, I thought you were making this shit up, but my wife Googled you, and it's all true. He goes, you have to write a book about this, and I'm like, really? I said, yeah, your life is crazy. I said, you think my life is that crazy? He goes, I'm Tommy Chong, and I think your life is insane. A pretty good barometer for crazy, right? And that's how it started. So I started writing.
Okay, so you started writing the book. I guess you got about 130 pages into it, and then you scrapped it and started over.
Well, in the beginning, I didn't know how to write. I never had written a novel or a book. I didn't know how to write at that level. So I was struggling. I couldn't really get anything out that I thought was meaningful beyond a page. I'd show it to Tommy. He's like, oh, that kind of sucks. I'm like, thanks, Tommy. Tell me what you really think, right? And after about a month of trying and failing miserably, I stumbled upon a book in the prison library called Bonfire of the Vanities, and written by a world-class author named Tom Wolfe. And I started reading that book. And the moment I started reading, I'm like, oh my God, I want to write like that. And I took about 3 months off of not writing and just studying his writing and using it like a textbook. And I taught myself how to actually write at a very high level. Then I started writing again, wrote 130 pages, which was far better than anything I'd written before, but I still didn't think it was good enough. Ripped it up. And then I got out of jail, 22 months later. And then I started writing again from scratch.
Okay. And you get out of prison, what, 2006?
2005, October 31st.
Okay. So you get out in 2005 and you start to write your real book.
Correct.
And someone at Random House finds out about the book and they're very interested.
Correct.
You got a $500,000 advance.
Yep.
And a bidding war started for the film rights.
Right. That was after I finished the book, but it was still a manuscript. It was edited, but it was not in a book yet. My agent slipped that manuscript to a few people in Hollywood: Mark Wahlberg, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and Leo. And a bidding war started between Leo and Brad Pitt.
Right. And Leo won. I guess him and Warner Brothers came up with $1 million.
With Scorsese attached as well.
How did that feel to have a movie deal with Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Warner Brothers?
Shocking. It was literally, for me, it was a life-changing experience. Not just that, but the whole process of spending a year teaching myself a skill, another year writing, executing on that, and that knowledge I'd acquired through a lot of hard work, perseverance, writing this book and not making any money in the beginning. It took me a few months to sell it. Then getting some money from Random House and then finishing the book. It was very, very difficult to write that book. And then it turning into this crazy thing with Leo and Marty. It kind of was this lesson I learned in life about delaying my gratification, that good things take time. And it really also gave me a lot more insight into my own frailties as a person, my strengths, my weaknesses. And I felt like I came out of that really very much more in touch with, who I was and what I would accomplish going forward and what I would never do again.
Right. And I mean, the story behind making this movie is kind of interesting because they went and bought the rights. And I guess right afterwards, the whole financial crisis happened.
Well, no, what happened is normally when you sell a book like that and a screenwriter will take a crack at it, it takes 7, 8 drafts and like they hire writers, they fire writers. Like in this case, the writer, Terry Winters, who's brilliant, the first draft was like unbelievable. It was like everyone read like, holy shit. It was like almost the movie that you saw. Very close. Okay. It was changed a bunch of times, but not fundamentally. the whole premise was very much the same. And Leo read it, Marty read it, I read it, Warner Brothers read it, and we're like, holy Christ, this is going to be a blockbuster. And they greenlit the movie. And then a few days later, the writers' strike hit, and Terry and all the other writers had to put down their pens. They couldn't polish it because it needed some polishing. And we missed the window, and Leo and Marty went off and did Shutter Island. And that was what caused a 5-year delay.
Okay. And then a company came in and bought the rights to your story. It's a company called Red Granite Pictures.
Right.
Red Granite Pictures was a company that was owned by a guy named Riza Aziz.
Correct.
Who later on had basically siphoned out hundreds of millions.
Hard to believe, right? He stole $3 billion from the Malaysian government.
He stole $3 billion from the Malaysian government. Well, and apparently Leonardo DiCaprio was paid with paintings. He got paid with a $3 million Picasso and a $9 million Basquiat.
That's misleading to say. Like, look, Leo, I don't think I've ever met a guy with more integrity than Leo DiCaprio. I'm saying that as a fact, okay? Leo is not a guy that would knowingly take money that he thought was stolen. Leo is naive. He's an actor. He's not a financial wizard or anything like that. He's a great guy. He's a humanitarian. He's generous, but he didn't know that the money was stolen. No, listen, I had my suspicions very early on, not that the money was stolen, but that they were just milking it from Arab sheiks. And I thought they were just taking daddies and the people's money and just spending it like wild badgers. I had no idea the money was literally stolen out of the sovereign wealth fund. How would you know that, right? That came out many years later. But when Leo was being wined and dined and bought and getting presents from them, that was independent of what he received for making The Wolf of Wall Street. They were giving him gifts. A lot of people give Leo gifts. People give me gifts, right? But Leo was Leo.
Wait. A $9 million Basquiat is not just a gift you give to someone for having dinner with you, okay?
No, it is. It is. From this guy, Jolo, he spent $7 million on Paris Hilton's birthday party. This guy didn't give a shit about money. $9 million to this guy was like literally a cup of coffee. It was all stolen money. The reason I knew the money was stolen, or I thought there was something going on, was when I showed up for the launch party of The Wolf of Wall Street. This is before it was even filmed. I sold them the rights. They flew me to Cannes for a party to say they bought the rights. I walked into this party. I must have spent $10 million on the party. I looked at my then wife and said, I promise you this is not going to end well. She's like, why? I'm like, no one would spend this much money unless there was something they were getting it without, doing the work for it. So I would really not fault Leo for this at all. I mean, he wouldn't know. He's an actor.
Well, right, because the company was ultimately sued by the Justice Department. They had to pay $60 million to settle. The reason I mentioned those paintings was because Leonardo DiCaprio had to give back the Basquiat and the Picasso back to the government, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not saying that listen, what I'm saying is that it wasn't like he took them knowing they were stolen or the money was stolen, and nor was it in lieu of a movie. He just was getting gifts like, oh, thank you. And then he had to give them back because they was stolen money. But it wasn't like he got them knowing it was stolen. He just did the right thing afterwards and gave them back.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. The whole thing is crazy. Okay, so the movie came out in December of 2013, and I feel like it was just a huge hit as soon as it came out. Like, I went to the theater, watched it, loved it. Everyone loved it. Leo played you. Jonah Hill played your partner. Margot Robbie played your ex-wife. And it was a big success. $392 million worldwide while it was still in the theaters. It became Scorsese's biggest hit movie, right? Yeah. It also, I guess, won a Guinness Book of World Records for the most swear words in a movie.
It also broke the record for most illegal downloads in the world ever.
Okay.
The movie, it did really amazingly well in the box office, but that pales into the comparison to what happened next, because it became the biggest cult hit of all time. So, it came into the box office, did amazingly well, did great on video. Then something happened. It just never died. It just came back even stronger. And it's been watched by every young person in the world, I think. I mean, older people as well. So it started this whole cult around it. And I guess it happens, once in a generation, like with Rocky Horror. But this was based on a real living person, though. So it obviously changed my life in so many ways, because I became sort of the living embodiment. At the same time, I was building a business going around the world, doing what they saw in the movie, but now ethically. So it obviously was a sort of 1-2 punch that created the brand I have today.
Right, because the film got nominated for 5 Oscars. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor for DiCaprio, and Best Supporting Actor for Hill. Leo ended up winning a Golden Globe. It was also nominated for Best Picture at the Golden Globes. So not only did it commercially do well, but critically did well as well. I mean, when it came out, how much did your life change?
It changed a lot. I mean, but it didn't change nearly as much until a year later. Because what happened was it was very successful, obviously, as you said. And it was a huge uptick in my money making. I was already very wealthy again. I already made a lot of money on, going out there and at a big business education, teaching selling, motivational speaking, some consulting. And obviously, whatever I was making, I could add a 0 onto that after the movie came out, but that was nothing compared to what happened a couple of years later. And it's like suddenly just like people are writing songs about me and dressing up as me for Halloween. And it's just like number 5 on iTunes. 5 years later, still in the top 10 on iTunes. And it just never went away. It just became this sort of stable cult hit. And what happens is, every single kid pretty much in the world watches this movie when they're 12 or 13 years old. And by the time they enter high school, they've watched it 5 times. By the time they enter college, they've seen it 10 times. And when they exit and go into the workplace, they now are, making money and they're entrepreneurs. So it's been this incredible thing for me that people age up. So it's created a huge global fan base for me.
I mean, do you feel like the film kind of depicted you as a villain?
No, not at all. I mean, I think the film it portrays me as a very conflicted person that, it shows me as a guy that good people can do bad things and that there's also redemption behind that. And I think, it's interesting. I think that in the absence of what I did in my real life, the movie would mean very different, but everyone knows that, the way I live my life today is empowering to people all over the world. Like every single day, wherever I go, people approach me. Man, you changed my life. Like you saved my life. And I went into this finance or sales because of you. And I was in a downtime. I lost everything. And I watched this or heard your stuff and it allowed me to come back from failure. So I think what I did in my personal life, it changed the movie. Well, it actually did change the movie because the original draft of the movie had me ending in jail. And then with the 5-year delay, I built a huge business going around the world teaching people how to sell and motivation. So they changed the movie to make it a comeback story. So it ended with me on stage, sell me this pen. So I changed my life story while it was being shot over those 7 years, which is an amazing fact, by the way. But today, I think that the movie shows the raw, I was an honest guy to start, corrupted by Wall Street and my own greed and drug use. And then loses everything, comes back even stronger and becomes a representative of around the world of what you can do with hard work, perseverance. And no matter how many mistakes you've made, no matter how low you've fallen in life, you can always come back from that. If you're willing to put one foot in front of the other, work hard, do it honestly. And I think that's really changes the movie in many, many ways, profoundly.
Right. Let's talk about that for a second. So after you get out, here you are, a convicted felon. You can no longer trade stocks, right?
That's not true. I do trade stocks every day.
Okay, so you can still, you weren't banned from trading stocks?
No.
Okay, but can you start your own firm, though?
No.
Okay, so you're banned from starting your own firm.
The only thing I can't do is start my own firm.
Okay, so you start doing motivational speaking. At this point, for you to do a motivational talk or to go to a company and speak at a seminar, how much do you charge?
Free.
Okay.
I started off giving free speeches. Then the first paid speech I gave was $5,000 at an entrepreneurs event. And then I slowly but surely built it up to around $50,000 a speech before the movie. Went to over $100,000 speech after the movie. Now it's over $200,000 a speech.
Okay. And now you actually have a successful company where you're booked all the time and you have a staff and everything else like that.
Most of my business is not speaking, it's consulting.
Aha. Okay. And how big is the business now? Can you say how much it makes a year? Or is that
It doesn't matter. I mean, let's say I'm more successful now than I've ever been. And I wouldn't just measure that in money. I'd measure that in the way I live my life and the number of people I empower on a daily basis. I have no doubt that in the next 5 to 10 years, I will make far more money than I've ever made before. Because, my business is really, really, just such a great spot. And I'm into a lot of venture capital, a lot of consulting. So I'm acquiring stakes in all sorts of companies. And these take a long time to mature. These are long-term investments. I don't do anything really for the short term. Everything I do has got a very long-term 3 to 5 year horizon. And I make money just on my speaking for cash flow and stuff. But all my real investments are very much for the long term. Many of them won't work because that's the way things work in venture capital. But some will probably become multi-billion, next Steve Madden shoes. And then ultimately, I live a life now that is so much better than the life I lived before because I was like high all the time, worrying about getting arrested. Like now I live I live a great life financially, but I live a free life and my mind is free and clear. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't look over my shoulder.
Right, because I think after you got out of prison, you were being investigated that you weren't actually turning over the money for restitution and everything, but ultimately they dropped the case against you.
Well, they were wrong. I mean, they were just fucking wrong. It was interesting because the judge ruled in my favor. It's like, fuck, like it was just a complete fucking fabrication. I was actually overpaying. All right. They were just so pissed that I the movie, they didn't want this to happen. Listen, I shouldn't say the government. It's probably two people you understand? It's not the government. It's a couple of angry people that are no longer even there at the government that were just didn't want to see this happen because they were jealous of it or didn't want to see a redemption story. And they, pressed a false narrative that I dealt with for many years. It was very damaging to me that hurt my business for many, many years. But through hard work, through perseverance, through just simply doing the right thing, eventually the press realized this is all nonsense. He's actually paying back more and there are no investors left. And it's all just paying the government. That's okay. I still do pay the government. But here was my attitude. If I have to pay, let's say by law, I have to pay 25% of my income. That's the most I could pay, right? So I'm just going to make so much fucking money that I can afford to pay 25% and live whatever life I want. That's always was my attitude from the beginning. I never cared about paying people back that lost money. The problem is no one was getting paid back. They couldn't find anyone else because they were all rich. People had gotten paid back. Originally, they ran out of people that were claiming money. That's in the actual original trustees report. So God knows what happens to the money that I pay over, and I still pay some, right? Another year or so, right? And I'm fine with that. But I never really cared about that. I never looked at that as something to try to avoid. I said, I'm just going to make so much money that it won't matter. That was the frustrating part because I was the opposite of what they were depicting. But again, through hard work, perseverance, and just doing the right thing, the press realized that. And now it's really wonderful. They get really great coverage again. And it took a long time. I think that's also a lesson to people that when you make, because I made big mistakes and I did break laws. And not that everyone on Wall Street doesn't do that. It was proven in 2008 how corrupt Wall Street was. But that doesn't make what I did right. But when you do break the law and you do get in trouble and you are a convicted felon, the world is going to judge you harshly. You have to earn back people's trust. That doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 3 years. It takes more than 5, 7, almost 10 years for me just through hard work and good works to earn back the trust of people. And now it's wonderful. So I say to anybody, whatever mistakes you've made, it's never too late. But you got to get out there and do the right thing.
Well, you were ordered to pay back $110 million. I guess $10 million came from properties that they sold right away. So to this day, how much have you actually paid back out of that $110 million?
It doesn't matter what I pay back because I have no fucking idea. And there's 4 people paying back into the same fund. And the number was far greater than that. But you're reading all fraudulent documents. So let's just I'm not going to get into this because I think it's a waste of time. Been through it too many times.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, when you look back on what you went to prison for and what you did and so forth, do you feel like you're completely innocent, you did nothing wrong, and you were targeted? Or can you honestly say, I did certain things that made these people lose millions of dollars, and I feel bad about that?
What did I just say to you a second ago?
You said that the money's not going back to any actual investors.
Before that.
Which
Didn't I
part?
just say that I deserve to go to jail like 3 times already and that I made mistakes? Did I just say that?
Yes.
Okay. So why you ask me the same question again?
Okay, fair enough. It was just a different angle.
It's not that it's the same angle. You're trying to push a narrative that's ridiculous, okay? Of course I made mistakes and broke the law. I said the first time I was guilty and Tommy wasn't. That was the difference in the two of us, okay? So, this is a ridiculous narrative because it was 17 years ago, okay? And what I did say is that, by the way, compared to what everyone else did, almost like Goldman Sachs bankrupting Iceland and Greece, I did this much wrong. But I said 2 wrongs don't make a right. So, of course, what I did was illegal, and I said I deserved to go to jail, right? It's what I did afterwards that's far more interesting, I think.
Fair enough. Grant Cardone was on your podcast. And the two of you kind of went at it at one point.
Right.
What do you think happened in that conversation that went wrong?
Grant Cardone was very nice to come on my podcast. And I think what happened was, I don't think Grant is used to people disagreeing with him because he said some stuff that was just weird, didn't make any sense. And everyone that saw the podcast said, wow, what's going on with this guy? Like, he doesn't know the most basic things about sales. In reality, I don't know how much of that was Grant just trying to be argumentative with me. And he came off looking very foolish, and it was very damaging to his business at that time. But I have nothing against Grant Cardone. I think he's probably a very nice guy, and, he's successful, and I wish him well. I think he made a fundamental error, and I'm sure he's realized that and he's learned from that, is that he went in, I wasn't trying to argue with him. I was trying to have a legitimately great conversation about sales and business with another, fellow sales trainer and businessman. I think he just, I don't know, something was going on in his head that if I said black, he said white. The problem was I was just speaking truth and asking very simple questions, and he got very frustrated and flustered, and then he challenged me to a cage match, which was kind of ridiculous. So, it flew off the handles. It was very bad for him, very good for me. But I don't think that describes who Grant Cardone is as a person. I think he's probably a good guy, and we saw each other recently. We hugged each other. It's like there's no animosity of any sort.
Yeah, I've interviewed him a few times. I definitely learned a lot on the real estate side because I've never really been a real estate guy. But yeah, I saw the interview and it seemed like the two of you just were not really clicking with each other.
Well, you could, to be honest with you, he was being, he came off very badly on that. It was not good for him because he was just, and he was just not saying things that made sense from a sales context. Whether or not he really feels that way and was just trying to be argumentative, I don't really know.
Well, throughout history, you've always seen these interesting bubbles occur. The tulip bubble, I believe, was the first one. I remember living through the dot-com bubble in the 2000s that ended up wiping out the business I was in. We saw the real estate bubble come crashing down in 2007. And, now we have Bitcoin and you have NFTs and so forth. Now, at one point, you spoke about Bitcoin. You called it a huge, gigantic scam. You said promoters are perpetuating a massive scam of the highest order on everyone. 85% of the people don't have bad intentions, but 5 or 10% do, and they're trying to scam you. I think it's a huge danger now that people are looking at this as the next great thing. It's a bubble for sure. The next stage, you'll see a real skyrocket. There'll be a short squeeze. It'll even go higher, and eventually it'll come caving in. It's almost a guarantee. But haven't you switched your stance on Bitcoin since then?
Yes, but I was exactly right. I was right and I was wrong. So I almost if you go back to what I actually said, I said I love blockchain technology. And I think Bitcoin, as I said, most people are not scammers in it, but there's this element of it that is so awful and terrible, which is a fact and was and still is, unfortunately. And Bitcoin did literally get pumped up to, I think, 20,000 and crashed almost the day after I said that. It started this precipitous fall back down to 2,000, and people got fucking destroyed. Right. The mistake I made was I was so negative because there was so much shit. Bitcoin's going to 1 million. I never looked close enough, and this was a mistake, by the way, that I've learned from, at the actual technology behind what Bitcoin was. to me, there was no way. And I think any person in the financial community, except very, very few, would say that, why wouldn't the government shut this down? My thing was never about Bitcoin. It was more about, like, why is the government's going to shut this shit down? Because, like, why do they want a competing currency, right? I think everyone is shocked they did. And if they could go back in time, I'm sure they would. But the cat is out of the bag right now. It's just too late right now. And it's got too many inroads now into the mainstream financial institutions that it's well past the point that you can shut it down. I don't think it would be the right thing to do, nor do I think there's any chance. But look what China did. They did shut it down. So, like, if the U.S. would have taken that route, I would have been right. But again, I'm a pragmatist. Like, I think I change my mind all the time about things based on new information. So I would divide the whole crypto world up into different categories. Yeah, I think Bitcoin right now is very legitimate. Ethereum as well. I believe both over the long term will go much higher. What happens tomorrow, who knows? Okay. But I'm always a long-term investor. But there's still all these shit coins and scams and pump and dumps and rug pulls that I think are still toxic and terrible, and people deserve to go to jail for those. Like I did when I went to jail for a pump and dump, right? People deserve to get their head handed because people are getting taken advantage of all over the world. That's not to say that the technology is not super exciting and that can revolutionize finance, and in many ways is. And that's why I'm involved. But everything I'm involved in is very long-term. I'm not looking to, if I buy something, I'm buying it for years. So I believe now that it's mature enough that it's not going to get shut down by enough governments to make it go away. I think it heads much higher.
Right. You actually bought one of the CryptoPunk NFTs not too long ago.
I did. I bought that, and I bought it because I think that over the long term, there's only so many of them. And I think a lot of wealthy people are looking at that as a sort of the gold standard, those in the Bored Apes for whatever reason. And I bought it. And, to me, it was really about also getting involved in the communities and really seeing what was going on with NFTs. I bought a whole bunch of NFTs, and I never launched my own yet. People say, why don't you launch your own NFTs? And the reason I haven't is because I would never do anything that I thought people could lose money on again. So, a lot of these NFT projects, they go up and they go down and everyone gets destroyed. So until I'm sure that, what I do has got a long-term utility to it, I'll be very careful before I launch my own NFT products. Eventually I will, and maybe they won't work, because that's okay. You could be wrong. But before I do anything, I'm going to be very sure that I think, at least in my heart, that this is going to be something that's going to make people money, not just give me more money. I have enough money.
Yeah, I mean, NFTs are interesting. I interviewed, this girl named People Pleaser, who was one of the founders of Pleaser DAO, which is one of the big NFT buying organizations. They bought the Doge NFT. They own a bunch of the Bored Apes. They own Snowden's original NFT and so forth. And it's really interesting because you do have legitimate ones, but the pump and dumps are insane. There was like this porn girl named Lana Rhodes who started this, she even said, I think this is a great investment for my fans. And they raised like $1.5 million in NFT, and then she pulled all the money out and then shut down all her accounts. And then I'm not even sure if that's illegal. You see what I'm saying?
Illegal. It's illegal, and she might go to jail for that. I don't know. I don't think that, at the end of the day, I don't think someone like that, just because of the resources involved to chase everyone, I don't think those people go to jail. I think the people right now, the influencers that are doing this again and again and again, I think some of those are going to be in for a hurt in the next year or two, because, just because you don't hear anyone getting arrested right now, the wheels of justice grind slowly. I got arrested 5 years after I was done with Wall Street. So you think you got away with it, and suddenly, boom, they're at your door knocking.
Well, one of the things that you've said is that you feel that college is a scam.
That's a blanket statement. No, I said that I think that college is required for people that need to get certain degrees. If you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, an engineer, yes, then you're going to have to go to college. But I think the whole idea that you need to go to college to succeed in the world is fucking nonsense.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting kind of thing, because I went to college. I got a computer science degree at Berkeley. And for a long time, I felt like I'd wasted my time. I should have gone to do something else, after I launched VladTV. Years later, I come to realize that all the stuff I learned over the years of actually going to college, I was able to utilize in my business. And I don't think my business would be even nearly as successful if I didn't have the technical background. Because when you look at all the competing businesses and the people who run them, I'm the only one that's actually like a computer programmer that actually understands this stuff. And when you look at, for example, in the long run, on average, people will make $1 million more during their lifetime with a college degree than with a high school degree. So
What you're looking at an old statistic, a statistic that goes back 75 years, maybe. How many years is that? How about the people now with this ridiculous, woke mentality of colleges right now? I think they teach people to be poorer. So I think that statistic, if you look back in 30 years from now, will be very, very much different.
I don't know. I don't know, because I feel that, listen, not everyone who wears a seatbelt gets into a car accident, but the people who do wear a seatbelt usually end up better off when they do get into a car accident. And usually people get into car accidents at some point in their lives. I mean,
I
all
don't
the
think
people
it's a valid analogy in any way whatsoever. I think that you're comparing what college are they going to, what university, what are they studying? And I think based on that, if you back out the professionals, so let's back out professionals from those statistics, doctors, lawyers, dentists, engineers, okay? Those people, they're backed out from the statistics to all the people that went for liberal arts, that went for degrees in psychology. I wonder what the statistics look like on those people.
Fair enough.
And why is it the richest people in the world mostly didn't go to college? They dropped out of college.
I think the very, very richest people probably dropped out. But I think if you look at like maybe the top 10% of the world, I would say the majority of them went to college. Usually a good university.
But I think that if that is a skewed statistic based on certain industries where you need to go to college, and as I always said, if you want to be in a certain type of player, yeah, you need to go to college. But I think that college has gotten so morally bankrupt and so full of shit and so utterly expensive because of the scam of student loans and saddling people with debt and raising the price of education. I think the whole system is full of shit and bankrupt, and I think it needs to be completely reimagined.
Well, I think it needs to be reimagined, but I still feel there's a lot of value in it. And we could agree to disagree on it. You and I had different backgrounds and so forth.
Well, I went to college. I went to college, okay? My daughter went to college, and she's a very successful psychologist. My son didn't go to college. He's very successful, and he went for years. It's not for me, and I support him in that. So I think it's something a person has to make their own decision. I think the idea is that to think that you must go to college and you'll be unsuccessful if you don't, I think is utter fucking nonsense.
Fair enough. Well, the system that you teach is called the straight line persuasion system?
Yes.
In a nutshell, what does that mean?
It's a system of basically communication. Basically, how do you get your point across to someone else in a setting where you're trying to get someone to see it your way? There's normal communication between you and myself right now where we're talking, we agree, sometimes we disagree. I'm not trying to change your mind or anything. We're having a regular, interesting conversation, right? Your opinions, my opinions, right? Often in life, you're actually trying to close someone, and that could be on giving you money. It could be on buying you a product. It could be on coming to work for you to make your idea turn into reality. You could be a mother or a father trying to convince your child to make their bed in the morning or do their homework. You could be a lawyer trying to influence a jury on the innocence of your client. You could be a political person trying to get people to vote for you. You could be a priest trying to convince your jury on a certain moral principle. Everybody has to go through life and get their point across to people in a way that connects them and gets them to see things their way, or else you're living a very disempowered life. And I believe that from the bottom of my heart. What the straight line system does is it allows people who are either terrible at that become very good at that, and people who are already really good at that naturally become amazing at it. So it's like the sort of magic bullet of communication that could be used in sales. It could be used just in general influence and persuasion. And it's very powerful and it works. It changes people's lives.
Got it. My last question to you is this. I've always pushed stock investment to my viewers. I started investing roughly 10 years ago, and it completely changed my life. Like if I didn't really learn, if I didn't start reading books by Warren Buffett and learn how money works and learn how if you're not investing your money, you'll never actually become wealthy over time. I really pushed that, and I've gotten thousands of people to start investing for the first time just from me putting that information out there. For all the people that are watching right now who've never invested in stocks before, as someone that went to the heights and then, had to go to prison for it and then start a whole new business and so forth, and you look back on your life, For someone who's just starting out investing, what would you tell them to invest in?
It's really simple. Just buy a Vanguard no load S&P 500 and hold it and don't ever sell it.
There you go. And the more money you have, just keep reinvesting and reinvest the dividends. And over time, you'll do okay, which is really my whole 401k. You know what I'm saying?
It's sad to say, but like at the end of the day, unless you're a professional investor that's on it every second and like you just really know what you're doing, it's just been proven. Even the most successful hedge fund managers can't beat the S&P over the long term. And especially when you're including the fees they charge, the commissions, the tax advantages of buying and holding and reinvesting dividends. So you're going to end up much, much better off. And it's been mathematically proven. If you simply buy the S&P and just hold it for 30 years.
Yeah. And I tell people that, but it doesn't sound sexy enough.
Well, that's the problem. I'm writing a book about that right now. And that's the conundrum, right? That's the best advice I can give you. But I know you're not going to follow it. So I also have to teach you how to at least navigate these other worlds without getting slaughtered. Okay. So I'm writing a book about that very thing right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're exactly right, because there's nothing cool to tell someone that you just bought some more S&P 500.
It's a shame.
From an
it's really
index.
a shame, right? You know, because that's the best investment, but people won't do it.
It is, because the S&P 500, I mean, an index fund is essentially the 500 biggest companies in America. And since it's an index fund, there's no fee because it's just a computer that just kind of recalculates every day. So the fee is like 0.001%. Like you said, most people don't beat the S&P 500 consistently. Even the big dogs out there, even the Warren Buffetts of the world don't always beat the S&P, you know?
Well, you can't do what Warren Buffett does. He gets different deals. He gets preferred stock deals. He buys, stakes in companies at in much better valuations than we're allowed to. But also Warren Buffett will tell you to buy the S&P. He'll tell you that's the best investment.
He'll tell you that. Yeah. And, by reading his book, it really transformed, how I look at it. And I mean, all my 401k is in S&P, and all my actual stock portfolio is in companies that I actually use every day that I'm closely connected to. And I only have like 3 or 4 stocks at any given time because I don't have expertise in everything else. I don't know about biotech. I don't know about car companies, not as intricately as I know a company like Google that I use their product every day. Sure. And my company is built on YouTube, and I understand when the company is doing well, when it's not doing well. But yeah, the S&P 500 is really the best investment overall, and you're rarely going to beat it consistently over a 10 or 20 year time span. And it's got dividends that you could reinvest, and you're sheltered from any sort of big movement from any particular company because you own 500 companies. Right. So I'm actually glad that you said that, especially from someone like yourself that have made billions over time. So what do you have coming up next?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of venture capital. I'm very much involved in the metaverse, in crypto, and in non-crypto deals as well. I mean, I'm really always looking for great companies that I can help with my brand, with my guidance, and if they need money, with money as well. I'm doing a crypto mastermind at my house on April 9th and 10th. It's pretty much sold out. But it's like, people are in crypto that really want to learn how to, have access to early stage deals. And with crypto and all these deals, it's very, very important to get involved early. And to also not to get involved with bad players. You have to know it's very easy to make money in crypto right now if you have access to early stage deals and you know that the players behind these deals are legitimate. Those are the 2 most important things: is who is behind the deal, who is running the show, are they legitimate, do they have success behind them, and also obviously what is the idea matters as well as the utility. But far more important is the people. If the people are solid and their idea is stupid, they'll pivot to a new idea and they'll make it work. And if you get involved in those deals very early, then you're more often than not going to do really, really well.
Yeah, I agree. And, along with those great deals will become some, there's some bubbles along the way that everyone's going to lose their shirt on. You know what I'm saying? Just like everything else, just like there was a .com bubble and a bunch of the companies fell off forever, but then Amazon and Google and, they're still going strong.
The one important thing though, because you're right. And someone said this exact thing yesterday. I was on a panel. But the one thing you have to remember is that before the bubble burst, fortunes were made on companies that went to zero because you got in early and took the ride. I always say you want to get in at the end of the beginning and get out at the beginning of the end. You don't want to try to get in the bottom or the top. Now, very often I get in at the bottom because I have access to amazing deals and people come to me with early stage deals. But for the average person, it's very difficult to find something early. Try to get in right at the beginning of the end of the beginning, and get out at the beginning of the end. Bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered.
Right. And unfortunately, trying to time the market, any market, is extremely difficult. Which is why for me, I've always found that to be too hard. I'd rather just buy a company like Google and just never sell it. Because to me, that's easier.
I couldn't agree more, except if you are if you're in the venture capital business, that's just a different business, right? And then you have to realize that you're going to have some huge wins, some major losses, and you better make sure the big wins are really big because they have to offset the losses as well.
Right. But that only applies to people like yourself who actually has the money for venture capital. For most people that are watching this, early
stage deals.
Yeah. For people who have 10, 20, 50,000, even $100,000 in their bank account, you do not want to do venture capital. Buy the S&P. That's what it is. Oh man, Jordan Belfort, man, definitely an honor to sit down with you. Like a lot of other people, I was introduced to you by Wolf of Wall Street, but I think what's so dope about your story is that really the whole stock market part of your story did not define your entire story. The fact that you were able to get out of prison, a convicted felon, a reputation associated with what you did, and start a brand new business that's completely different in a totally different genre and become very successful at it. To me, that's the most impressive part of your story. So thank you so much for sharing.
Sure, my pleasure. And I think that's what people need to look at, because a lot of people make mistakes, and not usually as big as mine, but they always, in their own life, they feel really big. And they're really, they're almost debilitating to people unless you're willing to, take a deep breath and realize that it's never too late. And that's the lesson of my life more than anything.
I love it. Jordan Belfort, until next time. Peace.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.